Now, I'm going to go off shared screen and I encourage you to put yourself on speaker view so you can see who's talking. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. The origin of this saying is disputed, but it likely dates back to an Iowa newspaper about 1926. Now, this saying became very well known during World War II, when it was aired often to counter arguments about the US's involvement in the war. The concern was that if our soldiers didn't understand what we were fighting against, they would not be fully committed. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. For me, the cliche is not supporting a war effort. That's not what it's about. It's about values. It's still a great saying when you apply it to your values. But what are values and why do they even matter? Most of you are doing pretty good. You're doing the best you can to get through life as best as you can. So what is this talk about values? Well, before I talk about the importance of values, it's important to distinguish between real versus fake values. How do these values sound to you? Communication, respect, integrity, excellence. These sound like admirable values, right? Well, these are company core values that were found in a company annual report from the year 2000. That company is Enron, whose fraud, conspiracy, and mismanagement cost shareholders over $60 billion in 2001 after bankruptcy and several executives were sent to prison. There's a significant difference between what values are professed and which are lived into. I spent 30 years in a corporate job, and I'd say the company I worked for was not horrible, nor was it outstanding. It was kind of a middle of the road as far as behaving in accordance with company values. And early on in my career, I realized that a new CEO would say what our company values were and what was actually happening, they were radically different. Because of this disparity, some core values of the workforce that persisted over my 30 years that were accidental and unwritten, but those values were suspicion, sarcasm, and wariness. Even now, I can't read a Dilbert cartoon without triggering some painful memories. But not all core values of an institution are fake, misleading, or hollow. They can be inspirational and unifying for everyone if they are accurate and honest. Now, at the optimum, core values can reflect what is really important to us, who we are, what do we hold dear, what upsets us, and what underlies our decisions or can all be connected to our values. Core values that are sincere can be a powerful decision-making tool to help us guide the decisions we make every day, the big ones and the minor ones. When we use our decisions when we use our values to make decisions, we make a deliberate choice to focus on what is important to us. When our values are shared, they build an internal cohesion in a group because our values tell us who we are. Now, here's a definition I found. It's a concise definition of values, both personal and for a community. Values are situation independent decision helpers. Now think about that. You're making hundreds of decisions every day, and every wonder that the underlying reasons you buy one product or another. I mean, why do you decide the things you decide? Ever wonder why you watch one news source and not another? Well, the answer is that you decide things by your values. If you value saving money, you're going to buy the lowest cost item no matter what. If you value liberal viewpoints, you'll probably watch PBS instead of some other news source. And those value-based decisions you hold are independent of the situation. So if you value honesty, if you greatly value honesty, you won't associate with someone you cannot trust at all, even if it's a family member. Living your values is messy, but when you don't decide to act according to your values, you feel it in your body. Your body knows when you're acting out of alignment with your values. You know this from the feeling in your gut and the tightness in your chest. Values are situation independent decision helpers. Now, values are neither right nor wrong, but they significantly influence every choice you make. Another way to look at a value is that it's something that you think is more important than anything else. More important than anything else. Think about this. If we had an agreement on our collective core values of this fellowship, we could provide a unifying lens through which to look at every decision and every activity of our church. So what did we do? Well, about 2 years ago, our church lay leadership started asking, what are the core values of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Santa Cruz County? This is a profoundly complicated question for Unitarian Universalist. Coming from our diversity of individual theology, background, life experiences, and attitudes, this creates a very wide range of individual values. And while it's likely that we hold similar values, it is a certainty that we hold very different individual values on many subjects. And most Unitarian Universalists are not timid about sharing their individual perspective on everything. The first challenge of the question, what are our core values at this fellowship, begins with discerning the difference between my values and our values. So, on June 1st, 2019, in a pre-COVID board retreat, our lay leaders worked on the question of discerning our collective core values. It was a complicated affair, starting with over 100 values, with the goal of reaching a consensus on 4. One of the pivotal moments was when a board member asked, what values are so important that if they were absent, you'd leave? You could not be part of this fellowship if these values were not core. Do you see the difference between being annoyed by some action versus being so deeply disturbed that you could not stay? Think about that. The question is not about what do you like about this church, but it's about what can keep all of us here no matter what. These are our core values. Well, That meeting reached a consensus. It took a lot of coffee, many bagels, a huge amount of Post-it notes, colored pens, dots, lunch, and about 7.5 hours to reach a consensus on 6 core values. In no order, they are transformation, universal inclusiveness, justice and action, covenant, curiousness, openness, love and compassion. What the board agreed that day was this fellowship would not hold together unless there are constant opportunities for personal spiritual transformation. They agreed that we must have universal inclusiveness, always being welcoming to everyone. They agreed that justice and a call to action must always be a part of who we are. And because we are a creedless religion, a core value of covenant keeps us together through all situations. And that we must be curious, open, and to learning new perspectives and new viewpoints. And that all our decisions and actions are based on love and compassion. Transformation, universal inclusiveness, justice in action, covenant, curiousness, love and compassion. What would this fellowship be if these core values were not universally upheld and lived into? These 6 values, they're not the core values of this fellowship. These values are the consensus of a board retreat a year and a half ago. We had a great plan. We were going to roll these values out to the congregation in meetings and in sermons, in small group ministry, congregational meetings, and we were going to do all this in the year 2019-2020, our church year. And the plan was for a congregational retreat in 2020 to reach a consensus with the congregation, with all of you, about our core values and to vote to adopt them. But you may remember 2020, it was not a great year for these kind of gatherings and this kind of dissemination of information. 2020 was a year of surviving, not really optimum one for pondering values. So here we are. We survived 2020, and we are adapting to this new reality. And it seems to me that our core values have never been more important to hold us together as we move into and build our new future. 2021 may not be any easier than 2020, but you've proven that the church will still be here. Some core values have held and guided us such that we survived and thrived. Even though the previous standards of what church was like are gone, we're still here. And there are core values that keep us together. And if we agree on those core values, we can position our fellowship on solid ground to make future decisions to ensure an existence in harmony with what we firmly hold to be essential values of this fellowship. Now, this explanation doesn't end with today's service. We will be introducing these proposed core values to you in monthly service themes. The month of February will be about transformation, the opportunities for spiritual transformation. March will be about universal inclusiveness and to wrestle with the depth and complexity of what that means, not just welcoming people that look and act and think like we do. April, we will spend the month talking about justice and action. And May, my favorite, covenant. What is it about this denomination that is so special and unique that we are creedless, we have no dogma, and yet we are bound together in community? And these monthly themes will also be the focus of small group ministry meetings starting in March. We'll have articles and classes and for these values along the way. And someday we'll have a congregational meeting in some form to discuss and vote on them. But for now, I encourage you to ask yourself, what are my personal core values? What values are more important to me than anything else? And I also encourage you to ask yourself, what are our core values? What values are more important to our fellowship than anything else? If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Blessed be, may it be so.